evening, ladies.
Hello.
Hello. Tell me if you're hearing feedback. I hear it a little bit, but I think it's just me. Does it sound good?
Sounds good on my end.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to Monday with Mountain Mamas. So good to have you here live with us tonight. If you're on the replay, we're so glad to have you as well. And we have a lot to talk about. So I'm just going to jump right in. I'm going to hand it over to Mama DL for a quick intro, and we're going to get started.
Well, as always, I will remind everyone that we have 21 Mountain Mamas on the primary ballot. They speak for themselves, but they are one in terms of getting to know each other, support each other, work together, and do their best to have 21 forward-thinking women in the West Virginia Legislature who will hit the ground running. So hope you have had a good Monday. I have on a new shirt that is
nice.
kind, spelled out in sign language. And for many years, Reverend Barber did Moral Mondays at the North Carolina Capitol, and he moved that effort national under the name the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. So I was downtown that they had a caravan of the various things that are happening or not happening that make life hard for poor people and a lot of other people. And so this seemed like an appropriate shirt because the word of the day is kind of kind. And kind does not mean nice. It does not mean that you are conflict averse. It does not mean you don't speak up. It means that you come from a place of compassion and an attempt to listen to people. Because, I listened to a couple of capitalist versus socialist arguments or just yelling matches downtown. And I thought, this is no way to move forward. That you really have to listen with kindness and respect, because I don't have to tell you what is happening in this country, because people are listening to whatever social media is their echo chamber and only taking in the things that match their values and view of the world. And it is just getting more and more polarized. And in that way, I think more and more crazy. So we'll spend this hour with some women who have some very sane and important things to talk about. And every night before you go to bed, just be grateful that you are in a position to do something kind and have something that you recall over the course of your day that you thought, well, that was a kind thing that I did for someone or that someone did for me. Because being kind is still being strong. So take it away. Good to see you all.
All right. Well, we will hopefully see DL soon, but thank you, ladies, for joining me again this Monday evening. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot to talk about tonight. We are thankful for so many amazing women running for office this year. And I want to echo what DL said. One of the things that I've been most impressed with, and I've worked in politics, I've been in nonpartisan roles, bipartisan roles. And the thing that I see is you guys don't agree on everything, but you agree to you get along, you support each other, you're there for one another, you answer questions, you get advice. And so it's this really nice camaraderie of women who are supporting each other. So bravo to all of you. We need more of that, obviously. And we need more, she was talking about sign language, more kindness in the world. So and I will tell you, candidate Debbie Carroll may be joining us soon. She is at a Board of Education meeting and might jump on by phone if she can. So just as an FYI there. If you're watching live and you have questions for the candidates, they don't even have to be your candidate for your district, but if you have a question, let them know. Put it in the comments. And speaking of Debbie, there she is. I just said, Debbie, that you might be joining us from the education meeting. How did it go?
Well, they're in there having the meeting now. We were all standing out front here greeting all the board of directors as they came in, the Board of Education. So a lot of teachers. They're in their meeting now, though. So I had to get on here so I could talk to you guys.
Well, great. Well, let's just jump in. Susan's back with us too. Let's just jump in and introduce everyone. Jeanette, why don't you start off, and then we'll just go around and introduce everybody.
Sure, thank you. I'm Jeanette Rousey from Huntington, and I'm a candidate for House of Delegates in District 17, which is a 2-seat district.
Okay. And Kat.
Hi, I'm Kathy Ferguson. I'm running for the West Virginia House of Delegates in the 35th District. I live in the Dunbar Institute District.
Great. Susan.
Hey, I'm Susan Perry. I'm a candidate for the House of Delegates from District 24, and that includes most of Logan County, part of Boone County, and a smidgen of Wyoming County. So, hey to everybody out there, and especially to the folks in the 24th.
Wonderful. Debbie, tell us about you and what district you're running in.
Hi, I am Debbie Carroll, and I am running for delegate of District 62. That's Berkeley County, the northern part.
That's right. And you are multitasking tonight. You're at a Board of Education meeting. You've jumped onto a live stream here on Facebook. Let me tell you, you're getting it. You're everywhere tonight. So, and Cindy Welch is with us. Cindy, would you like to introduce yourself there?
Hi, I'm Cindy Welch, and I'm a candidate for House of Delegates for District 6, which is Tyler, Doddridge, and a little chunk of Pleasants County.
Well, so glad to have you, and hopefully we'll get some more ladies to join us. Let's be honest. We are getting down to the wire. 4 weeks till Election Day, and we have so many amazing women running for the West Virginia Legislature. It's so important because West Virginia has the lowest percentage of female or diverse representation in the nation, and so we have more women and children in the state, and so it seems that we should have broader representation in the House where decisions are being made, the House and the Senate. And so, if you want to know more about these candidates, you can go to mountainmamas.org. Mountain Mamas WV. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot the address. I'll put it in the comment section. How's that? And you can learn more about each of the candidates. But let's start off and talk about one thing that I know that is very important to all of us, which is October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I think many of us, I know at least maybe 1 or 2 of us have been impacted by domestic violence, either ourselves or in our lives at some point or another. Who wants to talk on this issue first? Jeanette, do you want to chat about it?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's an issue that has kind of been out of the news. And during this COVID-19 epidemic, we've had a rise in cases. We've had our domestic violence shelters, there are 14 of them in our state. They have been trying to make do with, they've gotten up to speed, I believe, with their masks and their PPE and those kinds of things, but they've had to make do with very limited funding and having to expand space for social distancing by using hotel rooms and this kind of thing. And there's not a funding stream to help the survivors of domestic violence to shelter somewhere safely. And the other piece of that is that generally social isolation is a huge risk factor for domestic violence, any kind of maltreatment. And this pandemic has set up the perfect laboratory for socially isolating people. So, there's kind of a compound of challenges that our domestic violence programs are trying to see, and they're doing the most wonderful job that they can. But we need to raise it to the level of legislative attention, to looking at policy, looking at budget, not only through the pandemic but afterwards. It's a severe problem in West Virginia, and I know that Susan had some numbers for us today. I'm looking forward to hearing what she has on the numbers. I know it's been hard to report with our court systems kind of in and out of access for a lot of people. So, there's a lot to tackle there. And I think, for me anyway, this is a big priority.
Well, it certainly should be. And when I'm struck as we talk about justice reform, one of the things I'm always struck by is the fact that we have people who are domestic abusers who are let out of jail. But then someone, gets picked up on weed and can't post bail and it sits in jail. It strikes me as so unfair that you're, anyway, it's just, the system as we know is broken and definitely needs to be remedied. The other thing too is, since school is out, we're seeing a decreased number of reports because teachers are a big component of the reporting system. They're the ones who see the children, who may see signs of abuse or neglect, and so with school out, as you said, Jeanette, isolation is even greater. And Susan is back here. Susan's on here twice now. Hold on, Susan. We're going to get the frozen Susan off. Maybe. I don't know. So, well, Susan, do you want to go ahead and talk about some of those numbers?
Yes, because my internet certainly is not functioning at its top tonight. As many of you know, I spent about 15 years in the court system, working in the family courts in West Virginia. And so I took a look at the historical numbers for domestic violence. And in 2009, there were 15,278 petitions requesting relief because of domestic violence filed in the West Virginia court system across the state. Now, the good news is that when you look at the 2019 filings, those are down, and they've been down, slowly going down for the last 2 or 3 years. So the 2019 filings are just barely over 11,000. So that's a good trend. But when you dive into the numbers a little deeper, what you find out is that some counties are improving faster than others. For example,
we may have lost Susan. Hopefully, Susan will be able to join us again to continue to expand on those numbers, because on the surface, it is easy to think, oh, we're going down. And in reality, we're not as successful as we think we might be. So let's see if we can continue with Susan. There she is. All right, continue on, Susan.
Back again. And after I make this point, then I'll get off, because it just doesn't seem to be working for me tonight. But some of the southern counties have excessive numbers. For example, Logan County in 2019 had almost 500 domestic violence petitions filed. That's more than Monongalia County. Monongalia County, which has a much higher population than Logan County, only had 450. So we're not seeing the same drop across the state. So there are areas where we need to continue to work on domestic violence prevention. And we need to really dig into these numbers more and find out why some counties are doing a better job of this than others are.
Absolutely. And for those of you that are watching, Susan, before you go, how is domestic violence? What's the definition?
Well, the definition for a domestic violence petition in West Virginia is fairly broad.
Okay.
It's not only a domestic partner, so it could be a husband and wife, it could be boyfriend and girlfriend, it could be same-sex partners, but it also includes family members too. So it could be a mother and child situation, a child abusing a parent, and a parent abusing a child. It can be.
Oh, we just lost her. Well, we'll continue that conversation for her, because one of the things I wanted to ask and throw this out is, when I met with, in a different role, I met with some FBI officials who were talking about that, unfortunately, in West Virginia, sex trafficking of children was a growing problem because of the drug addiction crisis. So I'm wanting to know, does that fit into domestic violence? Is that classified differently? And, would domestic violence shelters qualify for funding as it relates to sex trafficking, whether it's children or adults? It doesn't, matter. And then how can we better equip and finance these domestic violence shelters so they're not piecemealing literally funding and assets together on a week-to-week basis?
Can you repeat the first part of that question, Sarah?
So, yeah. So my question was, because when I met with an FBI official recently, they were indicating that sex trafficking of children, because of the addiction issue in West Virginia, was a growing problem. And so my question was, would that fit into the domestic violence petition, or is that classified completely differently?
Well, I think it just depends on, I guess, in individual jurisdictions. I really am not sure how that's classified here in West Virginia. But what I can tell you is that having done this kind of work in Maryland, when it came to that issue, we categorized it as violence against women. It came under that umbrella. And so it had ties with it, and it's on that continuum in some regards. But typically, what we found is that there was a lot of human trafficking, sex trafficking coming out of the foster care system, actually, and kids running away from foster parents and getting into that lifestyle. And so it's more so on the sexual assault side as opposed to the domestic violence side, but we know that they're both related, and these are both tend to be gender violence based types of crimes. So there's your nexus with that.
Yeah, well, one of the things I struggle with is when we see these problems and nonprofits specifically are looking for funding. This is not a new problem. It's been in existence for a long time. So 3-year grants aren't cutting it.
Yeah.
We're not going to solve domestic violence in 3 years. So we've got to find a better way of providing consistent, ongoing funding to programs that really work. I think there's not even is there a CASA office in West Virginia now, or is that, I know that's a little bit different, but is there a CASA?
Sarah, can I jump in a little bit?
Sure.
I think one of the things we've done in the last 10 or 15 years have started child advocacy programs. And they are frequently connected with domestic violence shelters, but not always. And that they are very much involved with forensic interviewing of child sexual assault. We have very strict laws on human trafficking. We have strengthened them several different times. And the domestic violence shelters have, they're a safe haven and can be a safe haven for those victims. But the real, and they've had to work with training their people to make sure that they're not helping abusers, and they have to make sure that they're very, very well trained, and they've been working on that. We have a human trafficking, I forget what the name of it is, that's under both U.S. attorneys in the North and the South, but there have been very, very few cases prosecuted. I think there's a lot of anecdotal information that's out there, but there's a lot of ammunition that can be used both at the state and the federal level. But I think for most of those victims, they're going to want to go to a child advocacy center. And we have many of those around the state. They're not exactly in sync with the domestic violence shelters. Then there's also this group called FRIS, which is more related to sexual assault. And there are different funding streams for each of these. There's never enough funding, but I don't think very many of them are on a just 3-year over and done. I think they are more and more solid. Don't you think so, Jeanette?
In terms of the
fund, well, I mean, they're not like out ready to lose their funding.
I don't think so. I know there was a funding cut, and there have been kind of threats of funding cuts. One of the things that I was communicating with Branches, which is the Southwestern West Virginia program, and a lot of the funding that they receive and the grants that even the renewable funding they receive is for direct service. So there's not a line item for preventive services and community engagement. So I think that's something that the cycle can kind of perpetuate itself unless you really can take on that preventive approach as well. So as far as the technical budget information, I'm not real sure on. Maybe somebody else would know that.
Kat, do you want to jump in?
Well, I was going to say that, so you have FRIS, and then, which is sexual assault, and you have West Virginia Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And those are sort of the anchors of the field in West Virginia. And they're going to get federal allotments, and they're going to get budgetary outlays from the state, or at least they should be getting that. So they should be solvent. But of course, they do fundraisers, and they're always looking for money so that they can expand their capacity to do technical assistance training, to help the individual centers do what they have to do. And then those individual centers are also too applying for Bauer grants and things of that nature. You'll hear Joe Biden speak about that very often, the Violence Against Women Act, and the monies that they help to create in the United States Legislature. And those monies are passed down. You've got criminal injuries compensation. All that money comes to the state and gets divvied up in an appropriate fashion. But most people are working on, like you said, 3-year cycle grants. But the idea is that for the smaller programs is that they become sustainable, and be able to do what needs to be done. But there's always going to be a shortage of money in terms of what we need. And I think, really, as we look at the issue and we look at it, we talked about children, but even just focusing our attention on women. And what I wanted to basically say today was really just draw attention to the fact that, there's an SOS that we need to be calling out. And I don't care if you want to call it Sisters Under Siege or Saving Ourselves, but women are definitely on the agenda from a certain side of the aisle, and they seem to have it out for us in terms of, equal pay, in terms of our bodily autonomy, so many things that are just coming to the forefront that we have to really guard ourselves about, and clearly violence against women. One of the interesting things that I came across, if I can pivot a little bit, last week, I don't know if you all were aware about the study that was done by Citigroup. And Citigroup did this study, and they looked at the cost of racism or structural inequalities. and it said it cost America $16 trillion, right? And here we're talking about we need $2 trillion to deal with some of the COVID responses, but $16 trillion was left off the table because of structural inequality and racism, and that's just with regard to African American, and that's just within 20 years. So we go further back and we add in, other communities of color, we're talking about a vast lot of money. And so there was a study that came out, I want to say, let me see if I can remember. I pulled it up so I could remember. And it's the Insight, hold on one second. It is from the Insight Center. And I only know this because I did a book report on a book called Eloquent Rage, which is a really great book. But one of the passages in there, one of the notes in there was that the median net worth for Black women between the ages of 25 and 39 or 45, something like that, was $5. $5. You wrap your, and this is for 2007, so you try and wrap your mind around that and you're like, how can that be? But when you look at the assets that one has versus the debt, that's basically what you're coming up with. So yes, you can have a house, but if you're getting subprime loans, if you're, having high percentages and things of that nature, on credit cards for repayments, all those things add up for for student loans. All those things offset what you have, your car payment, the worth of your car versus the debt. And so we're really, really in a precarious situation, and we have to have, particularly because you were talking about West Virginia and the fact that we are in the majority, and we have, a lot of us are in single-headed household folks, and we're raising kids. We have to really pay a lot of attention to these type of issues, and we need to have more voices at the table to explain this and really fight for what we deserve. There's so many things going on across the board that we just have got to pay attention, and we need women to come out and vote in numbers and vote in a way that protects our interests and advances the rights and the needs and requirements of our children.
Absolutely. So well stated. Kat, you bring something up. I spent this weekend watching some documentaries about people of color, specifically before and after the Civil War. There was a heavy emphasis on some of them of the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I have to tell you, even as I'm sitting here, my skin is crawling because some of that was so disturbing. And I think to myself, why would I stay and fight for a country that treated me so badly? I mean, I know all of this happened and it took place, but then, was it, I don't know where they said it, that maybe it was Saturday Night Live, they pointed out that the Black woman is the most vilified woman on the planet. And so I was just, it goes back to what you were saying, kind of this war against women. I mean, damn, we can't even get childcare. I mean, it seems like we're under the thumb of all the time, fighting for equality, fighting for equal pay, fighting for childcare, fighting for health care. I mean, that's why we need women at the table.
And I do want to clarify, and I'm gonna loop it back into domestic violence. Is that, and I don't mean this to say that we don't have any male legislators that have our backs. I think the overwhelming majority of men are well-meaning men, and will advocate for us. Now we want them to be feminists, no, but that might be a bridge too far. But I think that they have a healthy respect. It's the few. And it's the same thing with domestic violence and with sexual assault. Most of the men out there are really good guys. They're going to, care for you. They're going to be concerned, and they're going to, be intentional about their behavior towards you in a favorable way. But it's those few. and those few are the repeat offenders. So one of the things is I'm not sure, and shame on me for not knowing this, because I certainly have, means to find out. But I don't know if they have a database here or not in terms of offenders. But I know that was one of the last things I was doing when I was working in Maryland. And just so you all know, in Maryland, I actually ran the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council, for Prince George's County out of the Office of the Sheriff. So this was like just something that I did all the time. And then also was a program manager with the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And so, these issues are sort of near and dear to my heart. When I walked away from that career, I had moved from direct services to programmatic development and then more so policy. But, I do understand the importance of this. So I just wanted to throw that out there too.
Absolutely. And there, Delegate Fleshauer, there is a domestic registry, domestic violence registry, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was created back early 2000s, somewhere in 2000s?
I'm not really sure. I know I was on a bill for a long time, and I'm just not sure what year it might have been.
Yeah.
And they had
those
a pilot program too, didn't they, for domestic violence court? Because I know that Julie Yeager here in the Charleston area was big on that. And after everything that happened with that, I think it went by the wayside. I don't know, is that something that's happening across the state, or?
I don't think it's that common. I think there have been a lot of pilot, like there's been pilot veterans courts, and they sort of go and pilot mental health courts. They sort of go in and out of popularity.
Yeah, I've said this before. If someone says to me, let's start another pilot program, I just want to slap them right in the face, because I'm so sick of pilot programs that lead to nowhere. I mean, seriously.
Well, I think it's because it's so hard to make permanent change in this state. With the current majority that we have, sometimes you can get a foot in the door with a pilot project. So I don't feel that way, because sometimes that's the only thing you can get past.
That's a good point. That's a very, very good point.
I would like to talk a little bit about the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, because I think that is something we can feel really, really good about. It is the coordinating group for domestic violence programs across the state, and they have been very successful in passing legislation. And I think that they are very careful. They're very thoughtful. And we were really lucky that we had one of the two team leaders on our weekly virtual update yesterday here in Mon County. We have a show every week where we try to talk about it. Joyce Yadlowski is one of the two team leaders, and she talked about, what we know. And actually, there's a whole lot we just don't know about what's been happening during the pandemic. The closed for months, and communication is really difficult. Like you were saying, Sarah, the teachers might be observing. Well, one of the problems, we all know how we feel, how frustrated we feel right now because we've been cooped up. But that makes it very difficult. So one of the things she said is they have worked with their staff to help them figure out how to communicate with domestic violence victims in a way that's confidential. They've taught them how to think about texting and, trying to get phone calls, which can't be, looked at later on. It's been really hard for them. And as Jeanette was saying, they had these social distancing issues. They had to have way fewer people in the shelters. Although most people, it's only like 10 or 15% that actually use the shelters. But even still, they had to make sure they had enough space, enough bathrooms. And that resulted in the the motel accommodations and having to pay for them. But I think they've worked through that, and they've been able to use federal CARES money for that. But there's a lot they don't know about what really going on, and it may come out of the woodwork eventually. It's just been a really hard time for everybody, but probably a much harder time for people that are susceptible to abuse.
You know, you jolted my memory. I was on TikTok last night, and there is an African American gentleman who created an app specifically for if you get pulled over by a police officer, you can engage this app and it starts recording immediately. And then if it escalates, you push another button. I don't remember all the details, but then it contacts your top 5 people and it goes live to them. So it knows where you are and what's going on. And wouldn't that be interesting if we could put those on kids' iPads, on so many, I mean, just different ways of doing it where it couldn't be, you know, it's not noticeable.
Or
You know, for domestic violence
too.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. I'll have to pull that gentleman's name up because I was just awestruck by it.
So I was wondering about Cindy and Debbie. Cindy, you live in what county, remind me?
I'm in Doddridge, and my district is Doddridge, Tyler, and part of Pleasant.
So you live in a really, really rural area. And
really rural,
and so and I'm not sure, do you know what the shelter is that covers your area? It's probably not in any of those counties, the main part. They have satellites that cover. I'm sure it's covered. It's in a catchment area, but it's probably very scary for victims in your county.
Yeah, there's no place to go. And I was asked to serve on the board for Hope in Clarksburg,
Right.
which is related to that because there's nothing here. I think that Doddridge goes to Clarksburg. I'm not sure about Tyler, probably Parkersburg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably your legislative district is divided up. They call them catchment areas for the domestic violence. And you, Debbie, where is your main shelter and office? Martinsburg. Yeah. Have you been able to talk to them about how they've been handling this?
I haven't gone down there and talked to them lately. I have been in there before and chatted with some people there, but
well, they're probably working from home like everybody else.
Right.
Yeah,
But,
trying to figure it out as they go. I mean, that's it's been a tough situation. And
I was wondering where you got those numbers. Susan started off with numbers. I was wondering where she found all that information. How do I follow through?
Well, there aren't, what Joyce said yesterday is there aren't numbers for this year. She had numbers from like 2019, I think she said. And so there aren't any numbers for this year. That's what Joyce Udlowski said on our show yesterday. And I think she thinks they wouldn't be reliable in terms of showing the true extent of the problem, because a lot of people are not reporting things right now. And maybe it'll come out of the woodwork, you know, after, if this is ever, you know, slower and calmer. But you could probably get it. Susan used to work for DHHR, and I'm pretty sure that's where she got it.
Yeah.
And they usually have like studies that you can find online that have those statistics. You can go to the U.S. government for that information as well. But a Google search should really just generate some basic information and stats for you.
We have a lot of mandatory reports by state agencies. So the Domestic Violence Services Protection Board probably does a report every year to the legislature and to the government. So you're right. I think you might be able to find it through Google, but you know, it's always great when you have an insider like Susan. And it would be so great for all of us to have her to help us navigate those things quickly.
Yeah.
The one piece of information that I got from branches from this corner of the state is they said they've essentially housed the same number of clients this year. They've just had to do it some at offsite accommodations. So if, that, again, that might be underreporting. That might be the fact that the abuser is in closer proximity, to the person who is being abused, and they don't have that opportunity to escape it. So but yeah, they said their numbers are pretty similar this year.
Pretty steady.
Pretty steady as they've seen. But again, we don't know what's, just because COVID has upset so many different systems, we don't know who's not getting served. And they have been doing more, text-based, phone-based counseling rather obviously than face-to-face counseling too. So that limits people somewhat. And I'm concerned too I know especially with child maltreatment, when we have the schools fully operational, not only the counselors and social workers, but the teachers have more of an eye on when situations might be amiss in the home. So we've kind of lost that connection as well. And my concern is that there's kind of this whole cycle of trauma, from cradle to grave, basically. And one of the points of emphasis, I think, when you look at not only our child abuse response and prevention response, but also with domestic violence, is the ability of medical staff and police officers and everyone involved, in the systems, the courts and so forth, to be kind of that trauma-informed outlook, because we know so much more about that than we did even 10 years ago. And I think that it's important to make sure that we have those budgets and those funding streams to make sure that, it's not an individual client problem. It's a family-wide and a community-wide response that really needs to be fashioned, looking at kind of all of these systems together. But, I do know our workers in these domestic violence shelter networks are, they're heroes. They are heroes. And
They're sheroes.
They're mostly sheroes, yeah, for sure. I do know some males who have worked in those nonprofits, but the way that they had to respond, that you don't have time, like most of our our food pantries and everything else, people had to make up responses as they went along, in the spring. And now I think things are a lot more stable. But then at the same time, we're not getting the federal CARES money. So, and as winter comes and people can't be outside, I think somebody needs to have eyes on these systems and eyes on how this money is being spent to help people. And, that's my concern.
That's so true.
It seems to be kind of at a standstill right now.
Yeah, it's very, very frustrating with, and another little angle that sort of you talked about, Sarah, is fundraising. I mean, there is the Violence Against Women Act, which provides funding through the states to the shelters, but every shelter and every child advocacy center is also doing fundraising. It's really hard to do fundraising if you can't have an event.
Mm-hmm. As candidates, we know this.
Yes, we do. But I think it might be even harder for nonprofits. Like I participated, we have a really big girls' night out in Morgantown for our child advocacy center. It's really fun. It's, it's very well planned. And we had a little girls' night in, and I have to tell you that it was painful. It was another Zoom meeting. And I think most of us are to the point where we can't stand more Zoom, or our head will explode.
Except for this one.
Pardon me? Except for this one. Yeah, that occurred to me that I was being a little bit, well, I hope we have people that are listening today, but I do think we're not trying to raise money. We're trying to have a conversation, and hopefully that's a little bit less demanding, but I think it's really, really hard for nonprofits right now, and especially this kind. I know that one couldn't raise the amount of money and couldn't share as much information as we did at those prior meetings. Like, it was riveting hearing people tell how they became survivors and how they were succeeding because they had help from the agency. And that's true for both child advocacy centers and also violence against or domestic violence shelters. And
Absolutely. And fundraising is difficult in West Virginia, no matter what. And because, there's more than 11,000 nonprofits in the state, and the funding streams continue to narrow. I mean, let's be real. There's not a huge pool of big donors in the state. So everyone's vying for those same donors. And, it's on a limited capacity of what is capable of being, provided. My nonprofit, we were going out of the state because there was nowhere else to go here. So, and I think you guys hit on something really important is we have no real-time information on domestic violence. And I think all too often on these issues, if we're going to prevent, if we're going to solve problems, we need to be able to have real-time numbers. Now, I say that not having a solution to offer, but I'm just wondering, with so much in today's technology, what could we do to provide something that would, like that app that we were talking about earlier. And then there's a woman who's been going around, and I don't remember her name. She's been going to law enforcement offices and departments. Basically, they kind of said, "Oh, you'll be okay." They issued her a domestic violence order, but she said they really didn't take her very seriously until he showed up at her back door and broke in and shot their 1-year-old son to death and shot her as well. And so, and the little boy died, and then he shot himself. So, it was such a powerful message and so tragic at the same time. And hindsight's 2020, but boy, when there's death in the picture, it's too late. It's too late. You can't resolve that. You can't remedy that. You can't fix that, or legislate, our way out of that.
well, I think we normally have pretty good numbers. It's just that in this state of emergency, in this state of pandemic, it's long. Nobody ever expected it to last this long, and this is a long time that we don't know what's going on. And I think that would be something that the women, and actually, I would disagree with you a little bit, Sarah. I do think there's nobody that's for domestic violence.
Oh, no.
Nobody that's for child abuse. So it is something that corporations can make themselves look good, and you can get that corporate money. But right now, it's a little harder.
Yeah, and
I do think that what you're saying about the numbers is, we when these women join me in the legislature, I think this should be a focus of the Democratic Women's Caucus. That we need to find out what was happening during the pandemic and what is the situation and what is the need. And I think we'll be counting on the Coalition Against Domestic Violence and also the child advocacy centers to inform us. And so I think for all of us, we need to be reaching out right now before the session starts and getting ourselves educated as what are the needs and what do they think is going on. I think they're in a lot better shape than they were initially from speaking with Joyce, but I would suggest all of you check, like Jeanette did, and check with your local shelters and see how they're doing, because it could vary, like Susan was saying. That sounded like there was a big difference between Logan and Montague County. That doesn't surprise me, but that means that it's all the more important that Susan get elected.
Susan would be an amazing representative for that area. She's, as you all know so well, she's incredibly knowledgeable. Her experience, her education, and her focus on ethics, as all of you do, I know there is a broad focus here on ethics in politics here among the women here and running for office. And so whether it's domestic violence, whether it's economic development, whether it's racial injustice, whether it's cannabis, regardless of what it is, we need more women at the table in the legislature. And
Well,
that's why
I'm
we're here.
wondering, Cindy, has there ever been a woman in your district? Do you think ever back to 1860, whatever? I think there have in yours, Debbie, and I know there have in yours, Kat, and Jeanette. There have been in yours, but not very many.
No, but there have been some very impactful women from
Right,
our
but they
community.
were certainly not 50% or even
No.
52. But
And
I
right now,
think there's probably you might be able to talk about how there's never been a woman before.
There's never been one in mine,
Wow.
Wow.
nor a Democrat.
yeah, and this is the year to
Never
make.
been one. Well, what about Sandra Lucht?
Oh, Sandra.
DL, do you know she was in the House before she was in the Senate?
I don't think she was. I think she went straight to the Senate because of flood stuff and, community service.
Mm-hmm. So,
Senate.
Debbie, I think that could be a good issue for you too. I mean, when I first, just as an aside, when I first ran, there were 11 men running, and I tried to make a sign with my last name, and it would not fit. So I just put Barbara because I thought, well, maybe people will vote for the only female running. And I think talking about, the low number of women, there are a lot of people that will want to have women's representation. And, that's cool that D. Caporalis is listening. Hello, D. That's cool. But anyway, DL, I probably interrupted you. You were about to say something.
Actually, no, I just came back on to say a few things, but I wasn't saying anything. But I did want to say a few things about the absentee voting, but I can't seem to get the light back up on my phone. But, we're not going to say much because the pattern kind of continues is that way more Democrats than Republicans are requesting like one Republican to 2 Democratic absentee ballots, plus the no party, almost 110 total absentee ballots, but of those, only about 46,000 have been returned. So as you're out talking to your voting friends, ask them if they have requested absentee. You can do that online. And then to, again, remind them to get it back and preferably hand deliver or in the mail very early. Those important dates again are the 13th. I think that's next Tuesday is the last day to register to vote. So do what you can to get voting, especially any 17-year-old that is a Libra or an early
Scorpio.
Scorpio, yeah, because they get to vote in the election, and it's an important election. Again, early voting, 10 days, October 21st to 21st, and the last day to request that absentee ballot is October 28th. But we had an interesting discussion among the Mountain Mamas today because, as in the past reports, the 65 plus voters, are that there have been more 65 plus than every other age category put together who have requested these absentee ballots. I mean, there's almost no contest. And someone shared a post on Mountain Mamas that said, women over 50 are going to decide this election. And one of our younger Mountain Mamas was going like, I don't know why, we post stuff like that discourages young people from voting. And it's supposed to have the exact opposite effect. Nobody wants to discourage young people from voting. We're trying to say, come on, don't let us old people. I'm in the 65 plus. I'm in the winning category. I do not want to win this particular contest, especially beating out every other younger category put together. Come on, you all. I mean, I know that, we're going to make it through whatever's going to happen because we old. I mean, we all got to get it together. And so I encourage/challenge that mountain mama to do a video or something that inspires people to vote. And, you know, and I'm going to ask one young woman that I was talking to who said, "Oh, I never vote." Like she was proud of it. And I'm just going to say, what would it take you to vote? I mean, I really don't understand. My sister's the one that sends me these stats, and she said, I guess the fact that it is both a right and a responsibility is not enough. I mean, but every one of us is challenged to talk to young people about why they don't vote, because we're not saying it is the be all and end all. It is one very important egg in the social change basket. And, you know, we are not in long lines around the blocks like in some cities. It is easy to vote. Now, I know that that's not necessarily true for people in our rural areas that have a long way to go. You can absentee, you've got early voting, and you don't have to wait till election day. So even if you need transportation, there's plenty of groups working that will provide transportation. So vote, 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 and please let's not have a graphic like that about future elections. We don't want just the old people to vote. You know, the world needs more young involvement, and one way to have a say is to vote. It is one way to be counted. And speaking of counting, I've sort of counted about Facebook likes of Mountain Mamas, and we haven't grown all that much since the primary. And so I have a small goal of getting us to 5,000 likes on Mountain Mamas. And it's interesting to me that while 4,500 people follow Mountain Mamas, less than 4,400 like us. And I thought, was that because 100 and some don't like us, or 100 and some don't want other people to know they like us? Or I don't know.
Well, it could be trolls.
Yeah,
Well, it's also
Or
the way
spies.
the way Facebook changed how you could either like or follow pages. So there
Yeah,
was
it
some
used to be
changes
that way.
there. So they grandfathered some in. So that could be who knows?
Well, I'm certainly not going to take the time to analyze those 100 and some people who follow us but don't like us or have not marked that button. But I definitely want to put one of those numbers up to 5,000, and we have less than 30 days to do it. So I will report on the more likes, but like, please like us. I mean, I don't really want to beg, but please like us. And while you're going to Mountain Mamas on Facebook, I've put up several, some of them are the new montages of the 2020 Mountain Mamas. Some of them are some posts that have been up from prior years. But anytime you see a secure ActBlue URL that ends in Mountain Mamas, you can go on there and you can pick the 5 Mountain Mamas that are up here. You can pick your 5 favorite. You can spread out a contribution for 21. Well, there's only 19 because 2 don't have ActBlues. But you know, even if the $25 is split 20 ways, and you'll get your name on 19 ActBlue reports plus Mountain Mamas. So it's a little claim to fame that you're in the records of the Secretary of State's office, and we're happy to go to that effort, even if it's just $1.26 once you divide it up among all of us. So this is really the time where if women have money coming in, they have money to do things, to do that one more radio ad, to pay somebody for a day to go out and do some things they need to get done. So truly, if you feel like you have not done enough for this election, an easy way to do something is to make a donation to one or more Mountain Mamas, and that's easy to do from our Facebook page. You can also do it from the website, which is mountainmamawv.org. And I think that was all I had, except to remember our word of the day is kind. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you all, ladies, so much for joining us. Thanks to all of you who watched live. I think DL's made such a really great point. I think those of us over 50 either knew people who went to war, died from war. So we understand the critical importance of the vote and why we need to vote. We also know a time when women didn't have the choice of whether they carried, a pregnancy of their own choice, regardless of whatever it was. So, that just because you weren't there when it happened doesn't mean you're not going to be there when it happens again. So you got to vote, folks. You got to vote. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, we'll see you all out next Monday for another Monday with Mountain Mamas.
Hopefully
Good
a less
evening.
squawky one. We were kind of squawky tonight.
We
But
were.
we're going to blame West Virginia broadband on that.
Well, yeah, I hope people are taking notice of the squawks and the fact that Susan was here and there and jumping in and jumping out. So yeah, but ladies who are running, thank you for putting your name in the hat and for hitting the pavement. Delegate Flashauer, thank you so much for your continued service. Ladies, it's always a pleasure to be here with you, and we'll see you next week. Good luck.
Yeah, 8 is not enough.
8 is not enough.
Not enough. That's a good one.
More kind. All right, ladies.
More
Have a good evening.
enough.